Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Nandi Gamble, and I am the Director of Public Policy for Delaware Family Policy Council. And you are with myself and Rich Bryant, who is our Policy Communications Specialist. We have other members of the team that are on tonight with us as well. They are monitoring the comments over on YouTube. So at any point, if you have questions, make sure that you put your questions within the comments so that way we can get those answered during the Q&A this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to go through this presentation. We quite often do something similar to this, but it's much smaller and usually right before a testimony time, a committee hearing comes up. But we wanted to take the opportunity to be proactive and to help as much as we possibly can to prepare and equip those of you that are interested in speaking up and testifying for what you believe in so that you can feel as equipped and prepared as you possibly can. So let's get started. All right, I'm going to pull up my presentation here. All right. So this evening, we're talking about turning conviction into influence and what that looks like when we're testifying in committee. By the end of this evening, we will have gone over how to understand where public testimony fits exactly within the Delaware legislative process. Where does that even come up? For you to be able to confidently register to testify either in person or virtually, prepare a clear and strategic 1 to 2 minute testimony, communicate your positions effectively under the time constraints that you're given, and still be able to uphold a very strong Christian witness while engaging in policy discussions. We want you to leave with a ready-to-use testimony framework for any future hearing that comes up. So within the Delaware legislative process, it all starts, of course, a bill is filed. Once that bill is filed, the information goes out and it's assigned to a committee. The committee portion of the process is exactly when the public is then able to voice their opinion. You can go to the legislature and state where you stand on the issue, you support this, you oppose this. Excuse me, that is when the public is introduced to the process. After the hearing, the committee will take a vote. On the House side, the committee votes right then. You know, right before they leave, whether the bill is going to pass on or not. In the Senate, they actually do not take a vote right then. They pass around the bill amongst themselves outside of the public. After it goes to a committee vote, then it goes to the House floor. So all of the legislators then get to vote on it. If it's a House bill, the entire House floor gets to vote on it instead of just a small committee. If it's a Senate bill, the entire Senate floor gets to vote on it. After it makes it through that process, then it goes to the next chamber. And after that chamber, it starts all over. So a bill will be heard in committee twice. The first committee will be in the chamber where it originates, so House or Senate, and then the second committee hearing will be in the next chamber. After the last floor vote, then the bill, of course, goes to the governor for him to either sign it or choose to veto. Now, part of that process, as I mentioned, is that public committee, and that's when you get a chance to testify. But why does your testimony matter? Bills often live or die in committee. It is extremely valuable of a moment in the legislative process where the bills can be given life and move forward or be completely struck down and end in that point. So they're extremely valuable. Legislators are often tracking just how many people are testifying both in support and in opposition. I've often seen either the chair or other members of the committee literally taking tally marks of who is supporting the bill, who is opposing the bill. So your stance on it, your presentation, is very valuable. That volume speaks so much. We've often even seen legislators present stacks of the comments that they've received online, emails that they've received, either again in support or opposition of a bill. So they are tracking that. Unfortunately, when there is silence, when there is a side that doesn't seem to be speaking up, the legislator will assume that the bill is acceptable, that people agree with it, rather than understanding that there is dissent or that there is an issue. So your silence can help a bad bill continue on or prevent a good bill from moving on. What testifying means during that time is you are able to provide a public comment for the committee to consider. This is usually 2 minutes. That's the standard amount of time, but sometimes we've seen it reduced down to 1 minute. And I know 1 minute is not a lot of time to say much. You have barely enough time to say John Jankel, Jabraham Smith in 1 minute. But if you're prepared, you can make that work. When you are testifying in person, the first step is to enter the appropriate room. Online, you can see exactly which committee is going to be hearing the bill that you're looking for. You enter that room. Oftentimes, it is in the chamber itself. So you'll go straight to the House floor or to the Senate floor. Sometimes there are other hearing rooms, so the Senate or the House hearing room that you'll go to, and there's even other smaller rooms. So you want to pay attention to exactly where your bill is being heard. If you're unsure, you can go online. You can even often ask questions while you are in the legislature, but make sure you're entering the appropriate room. When you enter that room, you are going to sign the clipboard. There is always a clipboard somewhere around. If you come late, you may not see that. However, there will be a secretary or someone that's present that you can get their attention that you want to sign the clipboard. Make sure your name is on there and the bill number that you want to speak on. There are some committees that will even ask if you are speaking in opposition or support because they're trying to just kind of ascertain who exactly is in the room and make sure that there's an even amount of people that are called on. But most often, you only need to provide your name and the bill you want to speak on, and then sometimes even the organization that you may be working for or speaking on behalf of. If you're providing testimony virtually, there's a bit of a different process, and I'm going to pause here just to pull up this video. Again, if you have any questions at all, make sure you are putting that in the comments so that way we can make sure we get your questions answered. Okay, let's share this video. Lists out the different. Let's start here. When you come onto the main Delaware legislative website, you'll notice that there is a calendar on the right-hand side. This calendar lists out the different committee hearings that are happening in the upcoming week. When you choose the committee that you would like to sign up for testimony, you're going to click on that committee hearing. You'll notice that there is a camera as well as a document icon on the side. Do not click either of those. Click on the link to the hearing itself. Once you do so, you will be brought to the following page. Here you can see exactly where you need to register for the meeting. If you wish to watch the meeting but do not want to testify at all, you would click the meeting live stream. That's also where the camera icon on the previous page leads to. It does not allow for you to speak, only for you to watch. So you'll click register for meeting to testify. Here you will be asked some basic information, your name, email address. Do not click any organization unless you are speaking on behalf of the organization that you work for. Otherwise, leave that blank. You'll also notice that some committee hearings will even ask you if there is a specific bill number that you are going to speak on, or if you are speaking in support or opposition. For the most part, this is what that page will look like. Once you type in your information, you'll click register and join. And then once the register and join link has been clicked, you'll receive the link to sign in for that committee hearing in your email inbox. That link will allow you to not just watch the hearing, but also to speak. You'll show up on a list and you'll be called on from there. This is virtual test. All right, I apologize for that. It seems like at the very end of the video, it did not allow for me to show what that registration page looks like. When you click on the link that I pointed to, you will be taken to a registration page. And again, that's where you place all of your information. Let's move here. Now, when you're actually creating your testimony in preparation, and I'm sure this is the part that everyone has been waiting on, there's a few points that you want to follow. You want to start off by giving a very clear introduction, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like in a moment. Try to focus on one main point if at all possible. The more points that you try to bring in, the less time you'll have to fully flesh out each of those points. So try to stick to one main point if you can at all possible. And then you're going to want to include verifiable facts. If you heard something from someone who said something from someone and it's from a random clip that you probably don't even remember where it is, that's probably not going to be a good stat to include in your testimony. And this is for a very important reason, because quite often, if you are sending in your comments to your legislators and you mention a bold statistic, they're going to question you about it. They're probably going to respond and say, "Where'd you get that from?" And if your response is, I don't remember, but I know it's out there, they're going to immediately dismiss everything else you had to say, even if it was completely factual, even if it was common sense. They are not going to let that missing fact go. So make sure your facts are verifiable. If you have a personal story at all, that can make a very, very strong case because it's something that you have experienced personally. You are then the expert on this issue because you've experienced this. You've seen how this has helped or how this has hurt. That is a great thing to add in if you have it. And then, of course, you're going to want to provide a strong closing. Here's a few bills that you're going to want to just jot note of. We've already sent out information about these bills. We've included them in the legislative updates and the bill trackers, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. But these bills are ones that you'll want to keep on your radar. So as you are preparing for testimony, you can go ahead and get your testimony ready for these. We know that these will have another hearing. SB 5 and HB 14. HB 14 has not had its first House hearing. SB 5 has. So we are expecting at least two potentially 2 committee hearings for HB 14, one for SB 5. SB 100 has made its way out of the Senate and it's on its way to the House. So we've got one more committee meeting to stop this terrible bill. And then HB 272, again, has already had its first hearing in the House, but as we were expecting for it to potentially move forward, we know that we have one more committee hearing to stop it. I also included the Women's Right to Know Act, which is still in draft form and has not received a bill number just yet, but go ahead and prepare for this as well. SB 5 and HB 14 are both constitutional amendments that would add different elements of abortion, sterilization, contraceptives. HB 14 mentions that it is a, quote, right to privacy act. So it's an extremely expansive constitutional change for all areas of sex, marriage, etc. SB 100 is solely focused on marriage, but this is a sort of perpetual redefinition of marriage that would be open if SB 100 were to pass. And again, these are both constitutional amendments, which means that they need to pass both this session and the next to go forward. So if you were to prepare a testimony for any of these three bills, you would have that moving forward. You'd already be prepared and ready for when we call on you to testify. HB 272 is a threat to the First Amendment free speech, simply because it is a discouragement to abortion. And then the last one, the Women's Right to Know Act, is making sure that a doctor simply offers for a woman to have an ultrasound prior to her receiving an abortion procedure. She has to at least be offered the ultrasound. If she turns it down, she has the right to do so, but this does give her the right to know. Okay, so what does that formula for creating those testimonies look like? Start off with an intro. Have your main point or points. Sometimes there are a couple points that you have to point out. And then your impact. How is this bill going to impact those around us? How is it going to touch Delaware as a whole, or if there's a specific community that's even affected by it? And then what are you asking the legislators to do? Are you asking them to support, to oppose? That needs to be clear as well. So this is what your fill-in testimony builder looks like. This is a very simple formula that will start you off in the process of creating your testimony. You can build it out from here as much as necessary for how complex the bill is. So give notice to the chair. That is the person that is residing over the committee hearing. So Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, members of the committee, that's just natural decorum. That's sort of professional decorum in this particular setting. Then say your name. My name is blank, Nandi Gamble. I am testifying in support or opposition, and then the bill number. This is also very key because you're going to want to make sure that they recognize that you are supporting or you are opposing this bill. There's a couple of different places that you can put this as well. And then you lay out your points. The most important thing to understand about this bill is that's your point. Your impact is why this matters. So why does this point about the bill that we're talking about, why does that matter? And then again, closing out with your ask. I respectfully ask you to blink. I'm asking you to vote no, to vote yes, to support, to oppose. Oh, sorry, let me go back. And here is an example. This is a 1-minute example. This was from a hearing on HB 272. You can see on the left-hand side, I've got the intro, the area where the main points and the impact are, and then my ending ask. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Nandi Gamble, policy analyst for Delaware Family Policy Council, and we stand in opposition to HB 272. So very clearly, recognizing the chair, stating my name and who I'm with, if I'm with someone. You could be completely on your own, of course. And then where we stand on this bill, insert bill number. Violence, threats, physical obstruction, property destruction are already illegal. The Federal FACE Act already addresses those harms at clinics and places of worship, and it does so in a narrow, carefully balanced way. So here I'm stating my points. These are things that already exist. It targets harmful conduct while explicitly protecting peaceful protest. All of these are part of the point. On the next paragraph, you'll see as I'm ending, I provide some different examples. So here's what the impact would be. Under HB 272, physical obstruction is no longer defined by blocking an entrance, but by what the state believes someone intended. So the impact is that creates dangerous ambiguity. Pausing to speak on a sidewalk, praying silently. I'm showing exactly how this bill will be interpreted if it were to pass. That's the impact. And then as we close out for the ask, for these reasons, I urge you to reject HB 272. Thank you. You also notice that I have a couple of questions throughout the bill. Sometimes that can be part of your impact, is including a question to leave them with. So many of the bad bills that we come across have more questions than absolutely necessary. So many areas where it's not clear. If you can point out where those areas are in question form, it gives so much more for the legislators to talk through. So for your testimony checklist, you're going to produce 2 testimonies for each bill you testify on. Because as I mentioned, it's generally 2 minutes, but sometimes they limit it down to 1 minute. And it is very difficult to take your 2-minute speech and try and limit it down to 1 minute at the very last second, or to try and just uh, say your points from memory. It's easy to miss your main points. It's easy to start to ramble on, to go down rabbit trails, to miss everything that you wanted to discuss. So you want to make sure that you're writing this out and preparing for it ahead of time. Create your 2-minute version. Have your 1-minute backup. Make sure that your opening is clear. Make sure that you are speaking in a calm tone. You do not want to be raging, yelling, screaming. How dare you? Refrain from using those kind of statements of just being negative and aggressive in any way. You could definitely be assertive, but your overall tone should be respectful and calm. And lastly, make sure you have a strong closing. So all of the things that you've just stated, make sure they recognize why that is an issue, why that is something that they need to stand for, whether you're supporting or opposing the bill, and then making sure they know how you want them to act, whether it is to vote yes or to vote no. Make sure that that is present. Now we are going to step over to Rich as he shares about testifying as well.
Hello, all. My name is Rich Bryant. I am the newest member of Delaware Family Policy Council. I am the Policy Communications Liaison Specialist. Don't try to remember that name. But the reason why I am super excited to, in a sense, give my testimony about testifying is that I believe that only about a month or so ago, I was in the exact same boat as many of you guys are. Let me just tell you why. One, I had never testified, so it was really nerve-wracking. Two, I'm also fairly new to policy. So in a way, there was this whole shebang is new to me. Just being in legislative hall is brand new to me. And three, I'm only 20 years old. I don't have much work experience, let alone being inside a legislative hall. All I know is plumbing and now policy. So and also there was really I never had a blueprint of where I was going, of what this was going to look like. I didn't know how to sign a paper. There was so many things that I didn't know that Nandi just beautifully went over. I had never even seen the Senate hearing room until I had to go testify in it. Luckily, where I was at, it was delayed magnificently, so I at least got to get a really nice, scope of what I was going to do. I couldn't mess it up, so not that there was much credit to my end. And just essentially to summarize what I just said this last minute or so, I was neither red nor blue inside of Legislative Hall. I was green. I was very green, and I was completely brand new, as a lot of you guys may be, and honestly, quite frankly, as I still am. So, with that being said, I honestly just want to walk you guys through what I did to prepare for testifying. And I think the bet when I was thinking about how to describe this, I came up with an acronym, and it's called RAT, RAT, RAT. So here's what it is. R is read the bill, A is assess the bill, and T is talk about or testify about the bill. So the first thing, read the bill. With HB 272, for example, you can go on the Delaware site and you can read the bills that have been posted. And for that one, I noticed that there was an issue. It added in order to discouraged. And with that, I read about the issue of free speech. I read about the issue of buffer zones. Really, I read about the issue of the Federal FACE Act, which HB 272 claims to be the state level for. So read the bill, understand the bill, what is going on. A, assess the bill. Now, what does this mean? Well, I think the best thing to do, which is what I did and I found that worked best for me, was to bullet point key ideas. When you read this bill, when you see things that you love or things that you do not like, bullet point those things. Because honestly, this is a nerve-wracking thing, and you need to keep all the ideas that you have that is flowing through your brain, and then you need to eventually decide the main point, as Nandi was talking about, that you will drive your nails through. Um, for example, with HB 272, as I was assessing it again, I saw that it was sort of like the Federal FACE Act, except that they changed the way criminal offenses were and they added a couple words, which quite frankly makes it pretty different from the Federal FACE Act, which kind of solidified my opinion that the FACE Act was already sufficient, and this one is creating some issues, especially with free speech concerning abortion. Next, ask the questions, who supports this bill? You can also find it out through the site. Why does that matter? Well, if you see who supports it, it can answer a lot of questions for the things that aren't really clear, and you can see where this bill will go if these clarifications are not made. And when you see who supports it, see what other bills they've drafted. Go on their social media, see which legislator supports this, because you can find out a lot of the unclear things which you can bring up as you testify, which hopefully other legislators will see as well. And then ask yourself this, what will this bill accomplish? And that's probably the question that I meditated on the most, that I was chewing on the most as I was reading over HB 272. And I, along with Nandi and the rest of our team, emphatically saw that the conclusion, or what this bill would accomplish, is that it would limit free speech. So not only is it a moral issue that it's supporting abortion and not even really supporting religious worship space as it claims to, but it's also limiting free speech. It's a constitutional issue. And that's a no-go. Now, finally, the T part again, read the bill, assess the bill, and now talk about the bill. So the first thing is just to discuss it, whether it would be going to the bill tracker or legislative updates that Nandi posts and seeing them and then kind of dialoguing about that, whether it would be contacting your local legislator and getting their opinion on this, seeing if they can bring any clarity. Talk about the bill, discuss it with your peers. You need to become familiar with this bill before you go to legislators. And then you finally get to the point where you can write your testimony. And I cannot emphasize enough that you should probably write it for exactly 2 minutes and then recite it on camera multiple times. You essentially, Nick Saban said this. It's a coach for Alabama football. He says you do not do things repetitively so that you can only do them right, but you do them repetitively so that you can never do them wrong. So what I'm basically saying is that you want to record yourself speaking about this bill so much and have a pretty a solid time that you have pretty much mastered. So for me, HB 272, I would range from a minute 47 to a minute 55. I knew going in there that if I spoke too fast, a minute 47. If I spoke too slow, a minute 55. But I did know that it would not exceed 2 minutes. And it was around the same thing for the 1 minute version. I got it down to, pretty much, like this was my testimony. I made this testimony mine. Um, and again, prepare, prepare, prepare. Uh, I'm someone who, I love speaking off the cuff, but you can't do that with testimonies because you are allotted time. And often, when they say you do have 2 minutes after your introduction and everything, it's really a minute and 50. So you have, time is money, quite literally. In this sense, time is gold. Um, and I also want to say be organized. So show up early, show up charged, meaning if you're doing this on your iPad or your computer, have everything charged 100%, no less. And be dressed nice. You know what I mean? This is important. Many people have not done this before, so this is an honor of what you're stepping into. But also, don't be fearful because if you're organized, that will limit the fear that you have. Because again, Nicole has said this many times. Someone with that has the potential for a lot of influence but does not have the courage to go up is useless. But someone who also has a lot of the courage but no influence or no information is also useless. So I think if you follow this method, read, assess, and talk, I believe you can be both. You can have influence, but you can also have courage because of your preparation. And I would say the most important thing to do though, out of anything else, is to pray. It is, remember, you are not doing this for you. In fact, you're not solely doing this for the state, but rather you are primarily doing this for an audience of one, and that's God. That is to glorify the Lord Jesus Christ. Uh, I think it's important to understand that we are not right wing or nor left wing. We are kingdom policy. We want to bring heaven on earth. That is, in fact, our entire mission as Christians. So pray about this. So, like I said, I had no experience. I had no blueprint, no foundation at all. However, after reading about the bill, assessing the bill, talking about the bill, and showing up organized and early and praying, most importantly, I was confident. And after that, I was able to give my testimony on HB 272, which, Nandi, if you're able to, I would love you to play that just so people can almost see what it looks like in there and also hear what it looks like in there to be a little bit of technical difficulties. However, I do have the testimony with me. So I'm just going to actually read it. So bear with me if you will. And I haven't read this obviously in about a month, so it may be a little bit over a minute 47 to a minute 55, but here we go. Mrs. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Rich Bryant, proud citizen of Delaware, and I oppose House Bill 272. House Bill 272 is both unnecessary and dangerous. The Federal FACE Act has proven to be sufficient while not crossing into the lines of violating the First Amendment. 1310A2 says, by force or threat of force or by physical obstruction, intentionally injure, intimidate, or interfere with another person in order to discourage any person from obtaining or providing reproductive health services. The language of this bill falls to heavy subjectivity. What does discourage mean? Will it be a Class A misdemeanor, the same level of crime third-degree assault is, by the way, to stop and pray for someone before they go into an abortion clinic? To make discouragement illegal in any place is to get rid of debate. Where there is no debate, there is no freedom of speech. And where there is no freedom of speech, we are no longer America by substance, but only in name. What is odd as well is that places of worship are not protected from discouragement under this bill, only reproductive health services. Therefore, This bill seems to communicate that religious freedom is less valuable than reproductive freedom, a freedom which our founding fathers did not write about. This bill attacks the very identity we have as Americans, given that we have federal law that protects individuals from violence and obstruction in worship places or reproductive health clinics. This bill is unnecessary and far too dangerous. For the sake of being faithful to our Constitution, I urge you to please oppose House Bill 272. Thank you. So that was the finished product of faithfully reading the bill, assessing the bill, and talking about the bill, and coming there prepared and prayed up, because he who has the Lord is stronger than any obstacle the world can throw. Thank you guys so much.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Rich. Again, we apologize about that video, but if you're on the YouTube side, then you will see the links to both Rich and my testimony inserted by Lizzie. So you can go in and check those out. But you see just how the committee hearing room looks. We were actually in the House majority hearing room that particular day. But like I said, it can be in different rooms. All right. Now, something that Rich talked about was preparation, how important preparation is, and something that is also heavily dependent upon our preparation is our ability to truly provide a strong Christian witness. When you are trying to speak off the fly, especially in that setting, sometimes emotions are extremely high. People have been saying all sorts of nonsense, things that you know to be completely inaccurate, to be false. They are tarnishing the things that you hold dear. So your emotions are heavy. And if you get up unprepared, it will be so incredibly easy to say something that you will later feel convicted about. Whether you are disparaging one of the legislators, you are just speaking about them in a negative light and not showing the witness of Christ. So speak truth with grace. We are 100% there to steward government well, right? This is not about the P word. This is not about politics, but this is about us knowing how to steward government well. And with the government that we've been given, we have the opportunity to be a part of the process. So, stewarding that opportunity well is taking advantage of that process and actually speaking and testifying in the hearings. Speak true with grace, stay calm under pressure, no matter what is being said. During these hearings, the legislators do not ask members of the public questions as they're testifying. That's how it's supposed to happen. I will say, though I am technically a member of the public and I've provided comment, I have been interrupted or asked questions or stopped. Um, However, when you're prepared and you are staying calm under pressure, you continue on in grace. Rather than saying, "Hey, hold on, you shut up while I'm talking." We want to continue to maintain our witness, okay? Keep your dignity even in those difficult moments. Now, as Rich talked about in that preparation of your testimony, there are tools that we have already created to help you in that process. If you are unsure of just how to analyze it, of just where to start with the research, we have done so much already for you. The bill tracker, which all of this can be found on delawarefamilies.org/updates. The bill tracker, it lists out those sponsors that Rich mentioned. There's a direct link to the bill itself so that you can read it straight from the legislative website. And then there is also an analysis provided for you to kind of show you where we're going on the journey of analyzing the bill, also making sure that we're looking at things from a biblical world view. That's already on the bill tracker. During session, weekly legislative updates are posted, and that's both audio and the transcript. So you can listen to or read what is happening in the legislature, what bills are being heard, what bills are we following, and even some of the interesting things that happen in the committee hearings or in the floor sessions, conversations that happened in those debates between legislators. All of that is covered in those legislative updates. And then our alerts as well. When a hearing is coming up that you want to be a part of, we will let you know. We will reach out and say, HB 272, here's when it is happening, here's information about the bill, here is how to contact your legislator by sending in a comment. We'll tell you the time. All of that is included within the alerts. And then lastly, I'd like to mention our monthly countywide member meetings. This is just for members. We meet once a month in all three counties, and we are giving you the latest update. If you have not heard about those member meetings, I'm sure many of you are already members. Legislative updates. So delawarefamilies.org/updates, you'll get all of this information, and the QR code is right there for you as well. Now, we're going to be going into Q&A session shortly, so I just want to remind everyone, if you have questions about anything, about testimonies, about the process, you want to know where to park, anything, put your questions in the comments, and then when we move over to Q&A, we will get those answered for you. Next, if you have any interest whatsoever after this conversation in testifying and you're still wondering exactly which bill you want to testify on, you want to make sure that you get the exact information, or you want to go through a little bit more. You're still kind of shaky, unsure if your testimony is clear, if it makes sense, and you'd like for us to look it over. Go to delawarefamilies.org/DE Speak Up. So Delaware Speak Up, and the QR code is right there on the screen, or you can even give us a call. We'd love to walk through this testimony process with you. Again, if you have questions, if you've started your testimony, you say, hey, I don't know if this makes sense. Is this clear? Send it over to us. DE Speak Up. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to connect with you and get you even more plugged in. Now, it looks like we have questions coming over. We're going to move over to our Q&A, and I'll leave this slide up. Again, if you have questions, put them in the comments. Okay, here is the first question. It says, I find bills hard to read and interpret. They are written almost unclear at times or indirect. Do you have any suggestions when reading a bill? That is a great question. Rich kind of touched on this a little bit, but oftentimes when I'm reading a bill, something that I will do, I'm going to go ahead and stop share for a moment here. Something that I'll do when I'm reading the bill is I underline and circle tons of things. So I'm circling the words that I don't quite connect. Does this word make sense here? What do they mean by this word? Lots of underlining. Go through the bill with a fine-tooth comb. Again, that bill tracker that I mentioned that's on the legislative update page that we have, we've already done a lot of analysis for you. So if you're having difficulty and it's still not making sense, go to the bill tracker. And that way you can you get kind of a jump start on exactly how to look through the bill. Unfortunately, a lot of bills, as you mentioned, are written in a way that feels very unclear. There's a lot of legal terms and things that are used, and the general public, it's not very clear. I completely understand that, and that's why we've done the bill tracker. That's why we talk about these bills on the legislative updates and in our alerts so that we can break down that language for you. But again, if you're reading the bill yourself, you're going to want to underline and circle, find where those words that don't seem to make sense, how are they defining them? So, as Rich mentioned in the HB 272, there's a phrase, in order to discourage. How are they defining discourage? The bill doesn't. And that's where we take issue with it. There's several points where you point out a word that, what do you mean by that? If they do not answer the question within the bill, then you know that there's an issue there because it's not clear. Hopefully that helps to answer that. Okay, let's go to our next question. Okay. Do they ask questions about your testimony? So, as I mentioned, when you are providing your testimony, the legislators tend to not ask questions or pause the general public. As you're presenting your testimony, you're giving the full 2 minutes or 1 minute. Um, though I have seen that not be the case, that is typically only true of those that may be lobbying for an issue. But if you're just a member of the general public, they almost never will interrupt you or ask you questions. However, if you are sending in a comment, if you are sending it directly to the legislator through email, then they may respond. They may respond either to just say, thank you for your comment. I will continue to look into this. That's a pretty typical response. Or they may say, thank you for sending that. Where did you get this information from? Or, um, have you a statistic that proves that? They may ask a question in written form because they're kind of taking that more of a conversation and not necessarily just a public comment. Okay. Okay, so this is not a question, but I will read this. It looks like this is someone's personal experience. It says, hi all, great job, Nadine Rich. Not a question, just my 2 or 3 cents. So we're gonna throw your 2 or 3 cents in. It says, for a 2 minute testimony, I shoot for around 300 words. For 1 minute, about 150 words. That's a very good 2 cents to put in. And as both Rich and I stated, make sure that you're practicing that. I even record myself ahead of time so that I can practice the cadence, knowing exactly the words that I want to emphasize, and the places where I want to pause. And you know exactly how long it's going to take you because your time starts as soon as your mouth opens. You want to make sure that you're prepared for that. All right. Well, it looks like we don't have any other questions in our comments. Thank you all so much for joining today. Again, if you have any interest in providing testimony, remember those bills that we put up on the screen, SB 5, HB 14, HB 272, and the Women's Right to Know Act. And there's even more bills coming out down the pipeline that you may want to testify on. Go to DelawareFamilies.org/DE Speak Up. That link is in the comments. And if you're wanting to prepare for those testimonies, make sure that you've got the latest information, that you're following our bill tracker, getting our legislative updates. Go to DelawareFamilies.org/updates. Thank you all so much for being a part of tonight. We are glad that you are standing with us, locking with us, so that we can rebuild this culture of life, marriage, family, and religious freedom together by advocating for it through public policy and stewardship of government as we cultivate courage and effectiveness within ourselves and our spheres of influence. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.